Yesterday we were discussing about virtualization, isn't it? What were the concepts we discussed yesterday? Yesterday, basically, we discussed about hardware
Theorems.
assisted, hardware assisted virtualizations and some three theorems. So, which that hardware instruction set has to satisfy to achieve effective virtualization. So, after that, three theorems. So, today we'll see how to achieve virtualization. So, there are three major techniques. That is full virtualization, so partial virtualization and para virtualization. Okay, we'll see one by one. So these virtualization techniques. First, we'll see what is full virtualization. So for example, if we say that, so we want to achieve full virtualization, that means, so say once we install the hypervisor or the VMM, upon that, we will be installing guest operating system. Okay, so if that guest operating system supports virtualization without expecting any modifications to that guest OS, then we can say that yes, that supports full virtualization. So that means when we do full virtualization, after installing operating system upon the VM, upon the virtual machine, we need not do any patchwork or any modification to the operating system. That is called full virtualization. And here the advantages are complete isolation. That means, so that will be totally isolated from the hypervisor, okay, and also from the host operating system, and enhanced security. Okay, so since it is totally isolated, so there will be more security to the application what you are running on top of that operating system, guest operating system, and ease of emulation of different architectures and coexistence. Say for example, the underlying hardware physical architecture is say 64-bit architecture, and if you are using 32-bit operating system, that means then it has to recreate that virtualized environment for 32-bit architecture. So that can be done with greater ease. So that is the advantage when you go for full virtualization. So that is, we don't do any modification to the guest operating system when we install it on top of the virtual machine, and it requires complete emulation, and which in turn provides more security in terms of providing isolation, and it is ease of emulation. That is, it will easily emulate the required architecture for the guest operating system. And here the key challenge is interception of privileged instructions. Okay, so therefore when it comes to privileged instructions, so once again there is a trade-off, either that should be executed by the guest operating system or by the hypervisor. Okay, see, there can be three possibilities. Whenever we consider any instructions, there are three possibilities. That is, the instruction can be executed by the guest OS, or can be intercepted by the hypervisor, okay, or directly by the underlying hardware, physical hardware. Okay, these are the three possibilities where an instruction can run. Next is para virtualization. Okay, so that means here the virtualization is not completely transparent. Why? Because, so after, see, when we want to achieve para virtualization, so usually what we do first, see, there will be an host system, okay, and upon that there will be an host operating system, or maybe there or may not be there, that is optional. So then there comes the hypervisor. So after installing the hypervisor, we create the VM. Okay, so after creating the VM only, we start installing the guest operating system. So after that, so once we install the guest operating system, in case if it doesn't support our application, that means then we need to understand, we need to install a software patch, or we need to configure, we need to do some modification to the guest operating system. Okay, so after we doing some modification to the guest operating system, or upon installing a software patch to the guest operating system, then it will start supporting the virtualization. So that is called para virtualization. So therefore the para virtualization is not transparent. It requires modification to the guest operating system, maybe in terms of installing new library, or installing a software patch, or doing some modification to the configuration files within the operating system. Such modifications are expected. And in this case, we call it as a thin virtual machine monitor. Okay, that means we call it as a thin VMM or a thin hypervisor. In case of, so when you achieve para virtualization, that type of the whatever the hypervisor that we use, that we call it as a thin VMM. So why we call it as a thin VMM? Because it is not totally isolated. So it also depends upon the guest operating system. So we need to do some tinkering to the guest operating system, as well as we need the hypervisor support. So hence we call it as thin VMM, and it is not transparent virtualization. And the third variant of virtualization technique is partial virtualization. So the main task of this partial virtualization is partial emulation of the underlying hardware, not allow complete isolation to guest operating system. And address space virtualization is a common feature of contemporary operating systems, and address space virtualization used in time sharing system. See, that means, see here, everything is partial and on demand. Okay, so in case of partial virtualization, so it will partially emulate the underlying hardware. That means there is no complete emulation as we saw in full virtualization, and it will not allow isolation to guest operating system. Okay, that means, so completely isolating the guest operating system is not possible. So as a result, so it doesn't provide much security compared to the full virtualization. And address space virtualization is a common feature that most of the contemporary operating systems will do. So here also the same thing. So address space virtualization will happen. Okay. See, what is the meaning of address space virtualization? See, actually within the memory there will be address space where the execution, where actually the data is stored. Okay, so and but what happens when you are running your application, you feel that you will be having a feel that you are fetching from your own operating system. Actually you will be fetching from the host operating system. So that address space virtualization will be taken care by hypervisor in case of partial virtualization. And address space virtualization used in time sharing system. So that means in time means dynamic, that is during runtime. So that means address space virtualization happens on demand during runtime. Okay, so that is okay. That's about partial virtualization. So the takeaway from this partial virtualization is that it is not complete virtualization, where the virtualization happens partially on demand, and the address space virtualization will be done, and it will not it cannot you cannot isolate the guest operating system completely, because it is dependent on host OS as well, and address space virtualization happens on demand during runtime, and it will not provide much security compared to full virtualization. So that is the drawback. So therefore, always you should try for full virtualization. That is better, so that so you can provide better security by isolating all your applications. Especially that is very important when when you are dealing with multiple operating systems, that is multiple guest operating systems and multiple applications. Next is OS level virtualization. So that is operating system level virtualization. It offers the opportunity to create different and separated execution environments. So, okay. Okay. So operating system level virtualization means virtualizing at operating system level. So in the previous example, we saw what is hardware level virtualization. So in that we saw that, so upon the bare hardware, how we can directly install the hypervisor. Okay, then how to create VMs and all. So now here we'll see how to virtualize at OS level. So it offers opportunity to create different and separated execution environments for applications that are managed concurrently. Okay. Say for example, you have installed. Say, let us assume you have a OS level virtualization, and you are running say three different applications, and you are running it concurrently. So that means you have one OS and running three applications concurrently. Now, the duty of this OS is to create three separate isolated environments for all the three applications. So that means there is no intervention of address space of one operating system with the address space of another operating system. That is called creating separated execution environments. Okay, so that means, so it is partitioning the address space available into three units. So one unit will be given to one application, second unit will be given to second application, and the third unit of the address space partition is given to third partition is given to third application. So likewise it will create separated execution environments. And here there is no VMM or hypervisor. Okay, so there is no VMM or hypervisor is not required, because so you are configuring the OS such that you can create separate address spaces so exclusively for each of the application that is running on your OS. So that means virtualization is in single OS. Okay, there are no multiple operating systems, and operating system kernel allows multiple isolated user spaces instances. That means, so the kernel allows you to create multiple instances depending upon how many applications you are running. Okay, so creating the instances is dependent on how many applications you are running, and good for server consolidation. Okay, so the meaning is that, so you can very well utilize the server. Okay, one server multiple applications always gives you better performance. So that's the meaning of the last sentence. So example, okay, OpenVZ is the example. That is a tool which supports for operating. So if you install that OpenVZ, it supports for OS level virtualization. That means, so you can have one system, and so usually using one system only in a traditional way, we use one host operating system and we install multiple applications and we run. So the difference is that so it will not create isolated separated execution environments. The execution environment is only one, which will be shared by all the applications. But when you go for OS level virtualization, the only difference that it makes is, so when you have a number of applications, a number of separate execution environments will be created. So that's why you call it as OS level virtualization. Otherwise, there is no difference between normally how we run and OS level virtualization. Okay, and other examples include CRUD, Jails. Okay, so in your book they have given CRUD, Jails, and OpenVZ. Those are the names of the applications which support for, or the softwares which support to achieve OS level virtualization. So that means, so the process is like, so we need to download that software and install upon that host operating system so that it supports creating separated execution environments for concurrent applications or to each of the individual applications that we run. Okay, any clarification, guys? Hello?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, then we will continue. Next, programming language level virtualization. Okay, so that means we'll see how to virtualize at programming level. So that means while writing the programming, so what kind of programs we can write, and how it supports for virtualization. It is mostly used to achieve ease of deployment of application, managed execution, and portability across different platforms and operating system. Okay. So one better example for that is writing a Java program. So for example, by default, if you write any Java program, you can claim that, so my program supports for programming level virtualization. That means, say when you go to Macintosh, there is a JVM by default. When you go to Linux, there is a JVM by default. And even in Windows, there is a JVM by default. So these are the three important types of operating systems usually we use. So either Windows-based machines or Linux-based machines we use. Okay. So in either cases, there is JVM by default. So therefore, the moment you write Java program, you can always claim that yes, it supports for uh, programming level virtualization. So the meaning is that, so you say, for example, you write your program in Windows and you compile it. So the outcome of that, as you know, the class file, dot class file. Okay, and you take that dot class file instead of the source code and you can run it any environment. Okay, that is OS level virtualization. Okay, so that's why you can see the examples they have given. Example, Java platform, .NET platform. Say for your information, .NET platform supports for 75 different languages. That means you can write .NET programs in 75 different languages, but not all the 75 languages are popular. Only some 3-4 languages are popular, like ASP. Okay, like that. So even in C++, COBOL, you can write .NET programs, but those techniques are not um, popular. Okay, so .NET. So in Java platform, you have Java Virtual Machine, which supports for virtualization, and similarly in .NET, you have CLI, that is common language infrastructure, and also something that there is something called as common language runtime, just like how you have JRE. So there is CLR, common language runtime in .NET, which in turn that will also support for virtualization. It consists of a virtual machine executing the bytecode of a program, which is a result of compilation process. That's what I told, the class file. Okay, so when we write a program and if we expect that to support for virtualization, then obviously upon compilation it has to create a bytecode, and that will be interpreted by the JVM or CLI, whatever it is. And they are stack based virtual machines, and that means they use the concept of stack, so hence they are called as stack based virtual machines. And we know what is the property of stack. What is the property of stack? LIFO or FIFO? Last in first out. Yes. Yeah, LIFO. So therefore, so this virtual, the JVM or CLI, they follow stack based virtual machines. So that means that they're having the property of last in first out in terms of execution. An advantage of programming or process level virtual machines. So guys, look at here. The another alternative name for this program level virtualization is process level virtualization. Okay. Say for example, if you get say a question like, so explain briefly about process level virtualization, then that is nothing but programming level virtualization. Then you may have to explain about the Java bytecode and or .NET programs, which can be ported from one environment to another environment or one machine to another machine. And they are also called as platform independent code. Okay. So whatever the code that you write using Java or .NET, that is also called as platform independent. Okay. So, but which is truly platform independent means Java, not the .NET. .NET is not truly platform independent. Okay. Advantages: it provides uniform execution environment across different platforms. So, so how it provides uniform execution environment? Why? Because so here the JVM or CLI, whatever it is, it will come along with the OS itself. That means it is inbuilt, so it will be implemented so that the moment we have the bytecode, so it will provide the same environment irrespective of the OS that you are using, and this simplifies the development and deployment efforts. So that means as a developer, you need not worry about, so what if the program is installed in is installed in Ubuntu? What if it is installed in Fedora? What if it is installed in Macintosh? You need not worry, because the JVM will take care of everything, and it allows more control over the execution of programs. Okay, so that means you have more clarity and more confidence while executing the programs, because once it is converted into the bytecode, it doesn't matter where you are executing, so it will have a control over the execution of programs. Okay, everything will be taken care by CLI or JVM. And security wise, it provides more security by filtering the IO operations. Easy support for sandboxing. Okay, see the look at the last statement, that is very important. Easy support for sandbox. You need to understand the difference between glass box and sandbox. See, the sandbox means, so inside you can't see, okay, what is there inside. So everything is completely filled, and the glass box means it is transparent. Okay, sandbox is also called as black box. So black box means you don't know the implementation details, but you know how to use it. So similarly, when you have a bytecode of a program, so you know how to compile it, but you need not worry about what is the code inside that. Okay, that provides more security. Say for example, let us assume, so you have written one novel algorithm, okay, to achieve some meaningful task. And what happens before patenting your algorithm, if you give that source code file to anyone, so they may claim that it's their invention. So instead of that, what you can do, you can give them the bytecode, and you can ask them to do trials, to conduct trials, to check your program, is it efficient or not. Okay, when you are giving the bytecode, we call it as sandboxing. So when you are giving the source code itself, we call it as glass box. Okay, so glass box means everything is transparent. That means the code is available to you. Okay, so in that way, they are telling easy support for sandboxing. Okay, sandboxing is also called as black boxing. Okay, guys, these are the advantages: uniform execution and simplified development and deployment efforts, and to have more control over execution and more security and support for black boxing or sandboxing. These are the advantages of using process level or programming level virtualization technique. Or
Sir, can you repeat the sandboxing once again?
yeah, see, sandboxing means, say for example, if I say you are having sandbox knowledge or black box knowledge, that means, say for example, you know how to drive the car, but you don't know how it's been manufactured, what is the technology that they have embedded into the car, but you know the driving. So how to apply the accelerator, brake, clutch, and how to handle with the steering. So all those things, you know, that means that is called black box knowledge or sandbox knowledge. Okay, and when I say glass box knowledge means you should know completely how the car is made. So what is the underlying architecture, what is the internal dynamics of that. So you should know complete. Okay, that is called glass box. Okay, sandbox means just you know how to use it.
Okay.
Okay. Similarly, when
Okay.
you have a bytecode, you know, just if you know how to execute the bytecode, that is good enough. You need not worry about how what kind of code they have written for this program. Okay. So when you know what kind of code is written, what is the logic inside that bytecode, then we don't call it as sandbox. We call it as glass box. Okay. Yes. So next is application level virtualization. Okay. So whenever you say consider any architecture, the topmost layer is application layer. Okay. So now we'll see how what is the meaning of application level virtualization. So application level virtualization is a technique allowing applications to run in runtime environments that do not natively support all the features required by such applications. That means, say for example, you want to run an application right now. Okay, but so on your system you don't have the complete support to run and execute that application. So you're depending on cloud platform. Say for example, let us assume you're depending upon cloud platform and you're running the application. So then we can say that, so such an virtualization is application level virtualization, where you have an application, okay, and you don't have the 100% runtime support required to run that application. Hence you're depending upon some third party service and you're running the application. That is called application level virtualization. So that's why they are telling, so it is a technique allowing applications to run in runtime environments that do not natively support means your host is not supporting all the features required by such applications. So in this, applications are not installed in the executed runtime environment. Okay, applications are not installed in the expected runtime environment. So this technique is most concerned with partial file system, libraries, operating system. See, what is this partial libraries, partial file system? Okay, as I told, so you cannot expect complete dependency from your host system or the native system. So hence you may have to depend upon the in terms of libraries or in terms of uh, file system. You may have to depend on other systems or upon the cloud. So hence we call it as, so so hence it is partial. So then, so operating system, So operating system component emulation. Okay. Say for example, so when your operating system is not completely supporting, so it is relying on Cloud OS. So even though you are accessing the features required from the cloud, so you'll be having the feeling that you are getting total support from your host operating system itself. That is called as operating system component emulation. Then strategies for implementation of application level virtualization. So what are the strategies one can follow to implement application level virtualization? There are two techniques. One is interpretation. In this, every source instruction is interpreted by an emulator for executing native ISA instructions. That is, so instruction set architecture instructions, and minimal the startup cost but huge overhead. Okay, so in this technique, so every source instruction, that is every instruction so every command that you give, or whatever, whenever you access any functionality or whenever you give any command using your application, so that command will be emulated for execution in your host operating system. So that is native ISA instructions, and the startup cost is minimal and but huge overhead. That means to implement this technique, so it is very easy, but so going forward, so the maintenance will take the more burden. So that means the maintenance will be troublesome. Okay, to start with, this technique is very easy, but upon you working for a long time and when you are adding more and more features to your application, so that maintenance will become the overhead. So that's the meaning. And another technique is called as binary translation. Okay, so binary translation means converting, say for example, when your host operating system is not um, able to directly process the instruction, so it will do some intermediate translation. We call it as binary translation. So in this, every source instruction is converted to native instructions. So next, the meaning of converting it into native instruction is, so to the format which is understandable by the native operating system or the host operating system is called as conversion to native instruction. Okay, say for example, so you are giving one instruction to your application, so that is not understood by your native machine, so that has to be converted. So such conversion is called as binary translation. So converting it into the a native machine format with equivalent functions or routines, and block of instructions translated, cached, and reused. Okay, so that means, one, say for example, what happens when you reuse the same functionality again and again? So that means you need not do the binary translation again and again. So once you do translation, that will be stored in a cache memory and that can be reused as and when required. And the large overhead cost, but over time it is subject to better performance. Okay, so the cost is overhead, so to achieve binary translation, but it gives better performance. So how it gives better performance is, why? Because you need not translate again and again. So if you are using the functionality, so until you close your application, that will be saved in the cache memory, so that instructions can be reused. In that sense, it provides, okay, more efficiency during the long run. Okay, we'll stop it here. So we'll continue from tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.